Welcome to Series 2 of my podcast, Stories of Unconscious Bias. I'm Smita Tharoor. In Series 1, I had the great privilege of hearing stories of unconscious bias from some wonderful people about a wide range of topics. I laughed, cried, and was moved in equal measure. I started this series because I wanted the listeners to realize that we are not alone. All of us have similar stories. They may not be the exact same, but when we hear them, we can hear the parallels in our lives. My speakers have all shared their learning and how they manage their unconscious biases, which is also a wonderful life lesson for us. Series 2 will follow the same style of interview. I hope you enjoy listening. Hello everybody. I'd like to introduce Matt Henderson. Matt is originally from Scotland and lives in Yorkshire. With over 20 years' experience as a community worker, Matt is currently working as a project manager for Bradford for Everyone, a UK government social integration pilot programme. Matt has had some unusual experiences, and I'm pleased that he has joined me to share his stories of unconscious bias. Welcome, Matt Henderson.
Hi, Smita. Thanks very much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to you today and discussing all these interesting points. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, first off, the obvious one, these two words, unconscious bias. So what do you understand by that, Matt? Unconscious bias. What do you make of those two words?
So for me, I think all of us have some degree of prejudice and some degree of bias within us. And a lot of that is probably unconscious, things that we've learned over a period of time. You know, learned behaviours, things that we've picked up maybe through media or education, through our upbringing, but things that are not necessarily obvious or sort of known or consciously sort of that we think about that give us bias, but things that are there in the background that we've learned, you know, over a period of time. So something along those lines. That's my understanding of unconscious bias.
Oh no, I agree with you completely. All of what you've said is in my opinion completely right, because it is about upbringing and it is about the influences and the experiences you have. And of course, the whole business of unconscious means you don't know that these experiences that you've had are influencing you in one way or another. And so I think that makes it completely valid what you just said. But just to continue on that path of experiences and stories, I wonder whether you can kind of expand on that when you were talking about childhood or wherever else, and now with the benefit of hindsight, you realize that perhaps then you had an unconscious bias.
Yeah, well, I've like you say, you know, I've been working as a community worker for 20 years now, and you know, worked with a lot of people during that time. You know, when I look back over that, and you know what I thought or believed in interactions I had with people, I can definitely look back and see, you know, biases that I've had myself, and you know, the way that I've approached things, or you know, things I've tried to counteract or change because I've probably not been unconscious. I've recognised, you know, sort of biases that I have, and that definitely comes, you know, probably from my upbringing. I grew up, and like you said, I grew up in Scotland, you know, and I live in Bradford now. And where I grew up in Bradford was a very different community to where I am now. It was a very affluent small town up in Scotland called St Andrews. And the people living there, the diversity of people living there is a lot lower than where I am now. I mean, but in terms of, you know, working with people, and certainly in terms of sort of social class and things like that, it's a lot different to what I've experienced in my career. You know, and the last place I worked up in Scotland was up in Angus, which was a very rural area, and the issues we were kind of working with in terms of community was kind of rural poverty and working with people living in small sort of communities and farming communities and things like that. So to now work in a big city in a big district like Bradford, where there's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of different issues in terms of poverty, meeting people from a lot of different backgrounds, and learning a lot more about different communities, especially people have different racial backgrounds to me, learning about different religious communities and all the mixes within those communities. I can look back and over time, see a lot of change in my own thinking and understanding of other people. But looking back, I can see, the way my upbringing was, up in Scotland, the education, sort of surroundings I had, definitely ingrained a lot of unconscious bias within me. I'm happy that I've been able to, I think, meeting lots of different people and traveling a lot in my life has helped me to understand people a lot better and understand myself and my sort of bias that I've learned over time. As a white person growing up in an affluent part of Scotland, I've had a lot of that.
That's fascinating because, especially for those of us who perhaps don't know Bradford or St Andrews, you've mentioned, of course, that St Andrews is a white affluent place. But for those of us who don't know Bradford is extremely diverse, you've said, but has a very large Pakistani community. Is that correct?
That's right. There's a big Asian community as a whole in Bradford, and I think maybe. I think more than 30% of the district is Asian, and a massive proportion of that is Pakistani Asian Muslim community. So that has a big influence within the district. That's very diverse within itself as well, which is something I'm learning a lot about living and working here for the last sort of 10 years or so.
Fascinating. And so here you are, as this privileged white middle class St Andrews Scottish young man arriving in Bradford, which is extremely diverse. A lot of South Asians, predominantly Muslim and Pakistani. And so in understanding it and maybe exploring more about cultures and religions, tell me a little bit more about your experiences in that regard.
I've also enjoyed traveling. So I've traveled a lot around different countries. Traveled in India, I've traveled in Iran, other places in Asia and around the world. So I did have some learning and understanding about communities that come from Asia or Muslim countries. But coming to Bradford from where I was working before in Angus was a big change, and seeing a big learning. I definitely had a more sort of generic or sort of view or opinion of Asian community or Pakistani community as a whole, but getting to know, making many friends and colleagues over a long period of time and getting to know them, their life, their background, has sort of reaffirmed the obvious in me, that you can't sort of be you can't sort of generalize. Everybody is different, even within a whole. If we're talking about whole communities, so everyone's got a different experience of being a Muslim, different opinions on Islam and how that's sort of practiced or how they choose to practice it. And I've been able to visit a lot of different mosques, learn about different approaches to how people practice their religion. So, and I've enjoyed that and understanding that and sort of comparing it and understanding it in terms of my own faith as well. So I did have some understanding of that before I came to Bradford, but actually living it on a day-to-day sort of basis has helped me understand that, and also, learning. I've got so many friends from Pakistani origin that I feel like, I have to go and visit Pakistan, and this country has sort of become part of my sort of life, and so somewhere that I really want to understand more. But just it's. So many positive experiences of being welcomed and sort of that sort of togetherness that there is in Bradford with an Asian community, and being invited round, for going out for food or family occasions or celebrations. It's been, that's been a real privilege for me to get to take part in those things, to actually celebrate Eid with people over the years where I've been in Bradford, or go to iftars, or learn more from people that are part of that community. It's really made me me feel part of that community as well, and it's been an amazing journey that I'm still on.
What does that look like now, though? Because you talk about iftar and so on, but I think most recently, you made a decision to explore and understand your friendship even further. Tell us a little bit about that.
Mm. So yeah, every year, living here every year, I go to iftars with people invite me around to open fast, and also, in the end of the day, celebrate Eid at the end of Ramadan. And every year I'm saying, oh, next year I'm going to fast. I'm going to fast. So this year I made the decision that I was going to fast for the full time of Ramadan for all 30 days. So when I took iftar and I celebrated Eid at the end, or celebrated the end of Ramadan in my own way, I'd actually taken part in the whole thing. So I fasted for the full 30 days, which was an amazing experience for me, a real sort of learning. And I've got to experience what people go through while they're fasting. When now I feel a bit more qualified to join that conversation. And when I hear people talking about their experiences, I've got my own lived experience of that, so I can join in. So I really understand a lot more what people go through when they're fasting. The reasons that they do that as well. I mean, I guess one of the things I always thought was fasting sounded like a real hardship to me, or a real burden. Somebody that was Muslim might think, oh, Ramadan's coming up and I've got to fast for 30 days, and see that as something that they might want to avoid or get out of almost. I can't imagine somebody fasting for 30 days and enjoying it. But having taken part of it, I don't see it like that at all now. I see it as more of a, something to look forward to, and appreciate and really enjoy in many different ways. And fasting myself, when it's coming near in the end, I was almost thinking, I don't want to stop this, and I'm going to miss doing this. I've got into a much better routine in my life here, much more reflective and connected routine. And when it did finish, I did feel that something was missing. So I see it as a much more of a not a hardship or a sacrifice, but more of something to look forward to and appreciate. And I can understand why people really enjoy that. I mean, every day you wake up in the morning and you're going to be fasting all day, and you've got something to look forward to later on. When there's sunset, you check the time, what sunset's going to be, what time you're going to open your fast, and you look forward to that throughout the day, and you're much more mindful of what you're doing during the day, and you really appreciate the things around you. And then when you do open fast and you get to, drink some water for the first time that day, you really appreciate that. It's really uplifting experience every day that which sort of helps you, and it gives you a lot of purpose and focus, which really helps with your mental well-being.
That's so powerful. Thank you, Matt, for sharing that experience. Because here is, I'm slightly paraphrasing, but here is this white Christian man from Scotland sitting in Bradford and making a decision to try and understand for your own self what that feels like, because you have so many Muslim friends, and you live
Yeah.
30 days alongside your friends, and break your fast in the evening alongside your friends. And that is an extremely powerful learning, because what you were saying is I'm sure relevant to many of us who are listening to this conversation, that those of us who are not Muslim and who don't fast for Ramadan may think, oh gosh, these poor Muslims, they have to, it's going to be such a struggle. How do they manage? And it's so hot and they can't even drink water, X, Y, Z, all the kind of things. And these are our unconscious biases, as you've correctly said. And you would too have had the same unconscious bias, which of course you no longer do because you know what it feels like. Tell us a little bit more about these experiences, Matt. Perhaps before you even chose to fast, or while you were fasting, anything that you've learned from that other than what you've already shared?
Yeah, I mean, the spiritual side of it is, one side of it in terms of it being part of a religion, and myself being a Christian, that gave me a lot to think about in terms of why I'm fasting as well, and made me think about how other people might have viewed that as well. Why. I mean, I chose to become a Christian myself later in my life. I wasn't brought up in that way, but something, I've always had a sort of connection, in terms of wanting to follow religion or spirituality. I wondered what, people in the Christian community might view, why I would be fasting, and if, also if I decided, to become Muslim, or was exploring that and how that would make them feel. I thought they might be a bit suspicious, or thinking, that I was moving away from my own religion. But what I find was that people didn't really view or think like that at all. I find a lot of Christians celebrate Ramadan and Eid, and support their Muslim friends and colleagues in solidarity with that. We did a joint fundraising initiative together called Fasting Friday, and a lot of people from different faiths, no faiths, other Christians, were taking part in that. And we also had an online open iftar where we had the Bradford Bishop Toby Howarth, gave a blessing at that. So it was really great to see, you could openly join in with Ramadan and experience that and support your Muslim brothers and sisters, in another faith. And it really, really brought people together in that. So it was good. There was that side of it in terms of the sort of spiritual side of it, and that the people's unconscious bias, how they might view somebody taking part in Ramadan as well. I wouldn't want, certain members of the community might jump on things like this to take it in a negative sense, but I saw a lot of solidarity and a lot of positives and a lot of togetherness in that. This Ramadan, because it's COVID period, and people are staying at home, and people are self-isolating, and the social distancing, there's less interactions with other people that are fasting at the same time, so less chance to talk to people about that, apart from obviously over the phone or online conferencing in some way. But I was out and about, going to the shops and things like that, and taking part in things like food parcel distribution with the Muslim community. So I was able to chat to people a lot about, how they were feeling. And it was good to understand that, because people seem to have a lot of different physical experiences to it in terms of how it affected them. A lot of people, I'd heard, the first few days are the hardest. And I think that's because you're adjusting to dehydration, because in this fast you don't drink any fluids either, you don't drink any water, you don't take anything, so your body obviously adjusts to drinking after sunset and hydrating that way rather than throughout the day. The first few days were quite hard in terms of people talk about headaches and things like that, and the first couple of days I did experience that, and but quickly your body adjusts, and for the rest of my fast I didn't experience anything like that, because in the evening I would drink 2 liters of water, and that would keep me hydrated, really, I felt, for the next day when I'd be fasting. But I was out and people were talking about, how they felt. I was in the supermarket, and I was waiting in the queue, and the man that was serving at the counter was dressed in quite a lot of clothing. He seemed to have a jumper on and a fleece over that as well, and it was a really hot day. I was wearing shorts and t-shirt, and I was waiting in the queue, and people were chatting to him as they were buying their shopping, and he was. They were saying, "Why are you not roasting in that? You're sitting here. There's a big sheet of glass with the sun beating through on them." Thinking he must be roasting, but it was interesting. Listen to him, and he was saying that his body cools a lot when he fasts, and cools down a lot. He feels cold, and that's why he was wearing clothing. He said he didn't feel hot; he felt cold, and I didn't feel cold. But I was thinking that's interesting. The different experiences people have, or the effects on their body, but also, in these situations, I didn't choose to disclose, that I was fasting or not fasting. I was just sort of listening and interacting with the conversation. It's interesting that that other people would assume that other people aren't fasting or aren't Muslim or aren't taking part in fast. These are the kind of interactions I was just having out in supermarkets. But I was waiting in the queue again. We're standing two meters behind each other, waiting in these new queues that they have in supermarkets with the sort of new normal that we've got. The lady in front of me was, you sort of get to chat while you're waiting, because you're there a long time, and she was explaining to me that she was fasting. And I decided, at that point, I was going to say I was fasting, and I said, "Yeah, I'm fasting as well." And she was sort of looked at me and was really shocked, and to sort of look at me and said, "Well, why would you be fasting? What are you fasting for?" I explained, that I was the reasons, like I explained at the start of this conversation, and but she was really shocked, and she would never have crossed. It seemed to would have never have crossed her mind that I'd be fasting. So I guess I could sort of see a bit of unconscious bias in other people's sides because I think what I know now is, and what a lot of people talk about, you can be a Muslim, you could be white, you could be Asian, you could be black, you could be from any type of background. It's a religion like other religions where you could choose to become a Muslim and follow that religion. So people have a lot of make a lot of assumptions, on what a Muslim looks like. So it was a lot of really interesting interactions with people on their experiences and what they thought Muslim Bradford might look like, or how it was affecting them spiritually, or why they were doing it, or how it was affecting them on a day-to-day basis. But it's given me a lot to join that conversation and say, well, this is my experience, and share some part of that.
That's just so powerful, Matt, because if we think about what you've just said, I mean, there are so many different things that I've taken away from this whole idea of unconscious bias. I mean, firstly, the fact that you being white and Christian and choosing to fast, and then other people's reactions to you, like the lady standing in front of you in the queue, looking at you in your shorts and t-shirt, wondering what on earth, why is he fasting? What's it about? Plus your own understanding of how you could be perceived when you might say that you're fasting. Also your worries that maybe the Christian community might think you odd, which fortunately that was not the case. So there are just so many different layers here that you have kind of explained to us, for which I really appreciate, because you've explained the aspect of different religious groups, different ethnicities, and how people can view each other. And this is so much this is so much an important aspect of what you and I know as unconscious bias. Because what we often do, this has been researched a long time ago in the 70s. Two people, Henri Tajfel and John Turner, did some research on what we now know as social identity theory. And that is essentially what you were talking about, because what we do in modern society is we instinctively, unconsciously, we categorize, we identify, and then without meaning to, we compare. So, for example, you could categorize yourself as this white Scottish man, white Scottish Christian man. Let's put that into a category. You identify as that, and then you might say, actually, so I know what I'm about, and I know that I can make assumptions about the Pakistani Muslim man who's my next door neighbor, because I know better than they do, because I am who I am. And the same people will do the same to you. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but this whole idea of us going into groups, and what you have done is broken that group, because each of us feels safe in our own. We all feel safe in what's comfortable to us. All the Pakistanis together, all the Scots people together, all the, I don't know, Bangladeshis together, whatever you like. And we all create our own groups, and then we know we speak the same language, we eat the same food, we practice the same religion. Great, nice, safe place. And what you have chosen to deliberately do is not stay in that safe place, which is such an easy way of living, isn't it? You've broken that, and you've consciously gone out into places that you don't know much about, because you want to explore and learn more. And I find that totally fascinating, because not many people do that. So I appreciate you sharing your stories with us. So what else can you tell us? Sorry, go ahead.
I can really understand and identify with a lot of what you were just talking about there, and that kind of the way that we behave. And it is nice to, have an identity and stay within that. You can sort of feel worried about, changing that or giving some of that away to, change and mix with another group or another identity. But, what I felt was, I felt really part of something when I was taking part in Ramadan. Like I said, in the past, I've benefited from the nice things like celebrating Eid or Iftar, but I haven't taken part in the fasting. But this year, because I was taking part in the fasting, I really felt part of something. All the interactions I had with people when I was out taking part in food parcel delivery or Fasting Friday, and all the Muslims taking part in that, I could share with them, and I felt really part of that. I was getting encouragement, I was getting calls, text messages, things like that, people asking me how I was getting on, and it was really nice to feel part of that group. People were dropping food off at my door for me, making sure I had something to open my fast, things like that. But then there's I don't know, there's something about if you have an identity, you almost want to protect the integrity of that. So and you want to protect the integrity of other people's identity as well, and respect that as well. So I wasn't wanting to have my taking part in a fast anything like, for want of a better word, something like anything like a publicity stunt or anything like that. It was it was a genuine, sincere desire to take part in that and have that experience in that without giving up any of my own identity, but sharing that experience with others. And that I think that's quite a challenge to do, because you're obviously not wanting to jeopardize or take anything away from the community that you might see yourself part of. Let's say, like if we're talking about one religious community, to fully take part in practices from another religious community. But because what I saw was people from all religions celebrating Ramadan, and really being in solidarity with the community going through that. But I think the solidarity side of things, in terms of it's recognizing that at this time when we're going through COVID, when we're socially isolating, people are not able to visit their families as normal, and they're celebrating a major religious period and occasion. We wanted to join in with that. I think that's a great thing in Bradford. All these festivals are celebrated as one big community, as a district, and everyone can take part in those and celebrate them wholeheartedly while maintaining their own kind of identity and their own beliefs. Before, I used to, in my previous job here, I had a lot of students, and the majority of my Christmas cards and presents and things came from people in the Muslim community or other religious communities, because they'd be happy that I was celebrating Christmas, and it was that kind of period, just like I would want to celebrate Eid or Ramadan with them. So what I find is people like to learn about other communities and enjoy and celebrate, while also maintaining who they are as well. So I think living in such a diverse community like Bradford, where there's a lot of different races or people from different backgrounds or social classes, or people from all sorts of different backgrounds. If we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, we do a lot of work on diversity. But in terms of, there's a lot of religions in Bradford, and every festival gets celebrated in full, and there's opportunity to join in and learn. So if I ever move away from Bradford, which I hope I don't, I'll really miss that if I move to a community where there weren't people celebrating Eid or Ramadan, because I wouldn't have the opportunity to celebrate that with them.
There is such a charming, heartwarming, wonderful story that you're sharing with us, Matt, and I really appreciate it. So, any lessons that you've taken away? Anything that you would like to share? I mean, you've told us a lot that you've already learned, but any other thing that you would like to add? Any top tips from your experiences of how do we manage our unconscious biases? Because we may choose not to learn, have these experiences of fasting and so on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have unconscious biases. So how do we overcome these? How do you overcome them?
I mean, learning is the best way to overcome them. And one of the best ways to learn, I think, is by experiencing things yourself. So, if you were deciding to fast during Ramadan and go for the full 30 days or even one day, you would get a lot of support from the Muslim community. You'd be welcomed into that, and the wider community that's not Muslim. You'd find yourself being part of a really nice experience where you'd feel part of something. So you wouldn't have to be concerned in that. You'd really be in it together with someone else. You'd get a lot of support. And from my experience doing it, I would say once you get into a routine, that's what it's all about. Once you get into a routine, then it is it's manageable. But what I've realized is everyone has different experiences. Some people find the first few days harder, some people find the last few days harder, which I did. Once I knew that I was going to be finishing, the end was in sight, so to speak. I find in the days were getting a bit longer, the sunset was getting a bit later. I started to feel a bit more. I find it a bit more harder, I guess. But I would just say get into a routine and enjoy the experience. Stay in the moment as well. It really teaches you to stay in the moment and reflect and be mindful. And like I said earlier in this conversation, it's very good for your mental well-being in terms of having a goal each day and a focus and a purpose. It really helps you to center yourself. And certainly at the end of the experience, I would say you're going to miss it. So what I would recommend people do, which I didn't do actually, is to keep a diary throughout the experiences of your feelings. Because when I came to write it up afterwards, it's obviously a little bit harder that I've not been writing about it throughout. But there's always next year. You can always do it again next year, and But your first time doing it, me as a conscious adult taking part in it, I was able to really, really enjoy it. When I hear people talking about Ramadan coming up now, I won't feel like, oh, that's going to be a tough time for you fasting through that month. I'll think, wow, you're about to go through a really amazing experience, and you're going to really enjoy that. And I want to take part in it again and celebrate with you.
It's so very delightful to hear you saying all of this, and not just the whole experience that you've shared with us, but also about this wonderful city, Bradford, and the people of Bradford. And for those of you who have not been there, we all of us will be visualizing this wonderful, warm, supportive city of Bradford. And I know it's a very beautiful city as well. Matt Henderson, thank you so very much for sharing your stories and for explaining to us your wonderful experiences of Ramadan, of reflection, and of understanding the world at large. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you so much, Smita, for giving me the time to talk about it and record this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to my podcast, Stories of Unconscious Bias. If you enjoyed hearing this episode, do tune in every Saturday for a new interview. And if you could share, leave a review and rating, that would be hugely appreciated. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter @Smita Tharoor, and feel free to suggest new guests. Until next week.